Good morning, boys. So, we begin the next lesson in geography, and that is chapter 8. And the name of the chapter is Weathering and Soil. So, we have come across the word weathering before. So, now we will see in this chapter how weathering is very closely linked with soil. It helps in soil formation. Okay, so uh, now when we are going to do this chapter, there are certain words with which you will come across. So let us understand the meaning of these following words. First of all, you can see in the first paragraph. Now, this chapter is on page 59, so you please have your textbooks open. You will see in the first paragraph there are words like denudation, degradation, and weathering. And what are they saying? That these are used very closely by people. Okay, in everyday life, we use these words together. Okay, they are used like we use it for each other, but they are actually not the same thing. They are different processes, though they are closely linked, and they are all responsible for the formation of different types of landforms on the surface of the earth. Then on the second paragraph, you can see denudation or degradation. Another name for denudation is degradation. Now, what would that imply? Degradation means breaking down, okay? Degrading when it breaks down. So, denudation or degradation is the process, could you please underline, by which rock materials from the earth's surface are removed, resulting in the general lowering of the land surface. So, when denudation or degradation takes place, then the earth's surface, say if it was a hill, then it breaks down into smaller pieces of rocks. Then there is another process called aggradation, just the opposite of degradation. If degradation is breaking up, then aggradation is just the opposite. This is the process where there are depressions on the earth. Depression meaning where there is a hollow space when all these pieces of rocks are, these broken pieces of rocks and soil come and accumulate in these depressions. Okay, the depressions such as valleys, lakes, and seabeds, the depressions fill up and the level of the surface rises. So in aggradation, these depressions fill up and the level of the surface of the earth becomes higher. Okay, first there was a hollow, depression means hollow, and as earth or soil and pieces of rocks fill in that, then the surface of the earth becomes higher than it was. So these are the two opposite ways, denudation, which is degradation, and aggradation, which is adding up of rock particles and into depressions and rising of the earth's surface, and degradation is lowering of the earth's surface. Okay, and these two processes together are called gradation. So you please underline these. The process is known as aggradation, the one which I just explained. Underline. And these two processes, degradation and aggradation, are termed as gradation. Okay. Now, since we are going to focus on weathering and different types of weathering and erosion and the different types of erosion, let us understand what is the meaning of denudation a little more clearly with the help of a chart, okay, a flow chart, which I have done for you all. Okay, now let me see if I can explain a little bit of what is denudation. Now, I have written on top, the earth changes. Earth is constantly changing, okay? Now, there are two ways in which the earth changes. One is the exogenous process, the other is the endogenous process. Now, what does this mean? Exogenous process means the change that happens under the surface of the earth, and exogenous process is the process that happens on the surface of the earth, because exo means exit or out and endo means under. Now, under this exogenous process, we have denudation, okay? And denudation has three aspects. Now, what are these three aspects? One is breaking down of rocks. The other is downward movement of rocks. And the third is transportation of rocks. So we go back again. The earth changes. There are two types of processes in which the earth changes: endogenous and exogenous. And under exogenous, we have the process called denudation, which has three aspects: breaking down of rocks, downward movement of rocks, and transportation of rocks. Now let us understand this a little better with a diagram. Well, I am not an artist like you all, but still I have tried to make a little bit of drawing which will help you understand. Now, this is the surface of the earth, and say this is a rock, okay? Now, due to different agents like rain, frost, temperature changes, there is breakdown of rocks. That means rocks break down due to these different agents. And that process is called weathering. Now, the next, what happens after from this big rock or this big mountain or hill or whatever you call it, when the rocks break down, they automatically start falling down, because if they break on the top, then they start rolling down. Pieces of rock start rolling down. And that is called downward movement of fragments of rock. And that is called mass wasting. Okay, mass wasting. And the third is when these pieces of rocks fall down from the top of the hill or the mountain after breaking down. on the surface of this rock and they become smaller pieces of rocks, or they become like granules, like dust. They are transported again, maybe by wind, okay, to another place. So they are moved from one place to another, and that is called transportation of rocks. And what is that? Erosion. So I hope I have been able to be a little clear. You are a little clearer with what happens, okay, in denudation. So now we go back to the previous flow chart. So this denudation has these three processes, the way I have just explained through the diagram. These three processes of denudation are weathering, mass wasting, which is downward movement of the rock. Weathering is breaking down of the rock, and erosion is transportation of these broken pieces of rocks. So, when we are saying weathering and soil, okay, so these pieces of rocks are broken down into small pieces due to weathering, which is caused by different elements of weather such as rain, frost, and temperature. They break down and then they come downward and then they become maybe smaller and they are eroded. So, weathering ultimately results in the formation of soil, and when soil is formed, this soil is eroded. Okay, so in this chapter, we are going to focus on weathering and erosion. Now, I have again made a chart for you about the different types of weathering. Now, weathering can be divided into three types. They are physical, chemical, and biological. Okay. Under physical weathering, there are three types. Through thermal pressure, that means with the application of heat, there is a change. Okay. Then exfoliation, that is the application of pressure. When pressure is released, then there is a change. Okay. What happens is the structure of the rocks change physically. That means how they looked before, they look different. And chemically means the minerals and things which it is made up of, the rocks, that entirely changes. Okay. Then we have the biological weathering. Then the next point under physical weathering is physical weathering happens due to frost action. So physical weathering happens for one cause is thermal pressure, that is due to heat. The rocks might expand and contract and expand and contract due to the heat, and then they break down. Exfoliation is application of pressure. When too much pressure is applied, then also rocks break down. Then comes frost action. When there are cracks in the rocks and frost accumulates, and this happens for a long time, ultimately that frost is again melted into water and ultimately it breaks down. Under chemical weathering, we have it happens in four different ways: oxidation, carbonation, hydration, solution. And in biological weathering, it is again in three processes because of the growth of plants, the in the rocks might break down, then animal and plant decay, and another is burrowing, when animals dig burrows. Okay, so this is just an introduction to the chapter. Then what are the different types of weathering and what are the different processes? We will go into that the next time.